Welcome everyone to today's session of EmpoweRED. Finally, we're back with these really interesting and fun sessions that we're doing together. Today we will be focusing on mentorship and how to do that, how to build futures together. We're really excited. My name is Josephine Edberg. I work for the Swedish Red Cross and I'm part of the Glow Red Secretariat. And if there's anyone here who's new to the Glow Red, extra welcome to you. We are the global network of women leaders in the Red Cross Red Crescent movement. The network was formed back in 2018, and since then we have worked to get more women into leadership positions across all levels of the movement. And we're doing this in two ways, so to speak. It's first, we're doing a lot of advocacy work and pushing for the movement to make formal commitments and constitutional changes at different levels to increase women's leadership. And we're also doing it by encouraging women to run for leadership positions through trainings, peer-to-peer support, and networking. And the EmpoweRED initiative really falls into that second category of work, so to speak. This year, the American Red Cross has offered to support EmpoweRED, so we will be developing sessions together with them. This is very exciting and a great, not new partner, but kind of still a new official partner to Glow Red, I would say. With that, I will hand over to Anjana now from the American Red Cross. So Anjana Dayal de Prewitt is the Director for Diversity, Equity and Inclusion for the American Red Cross National Headquarters. She has a vast experience working in the humanitarian sector, including the IFRC, the ICRC, and Save the Children. And she has held various leadership positions in the last 2 decades and has worked in an impressive 30 countries in humanitarian settings affected by disasters and armed conflict. I got to know Anjana through the Glow Red Network, and she's really an inspiring leader and just an encouraging woman to work with. So it's with a very warm hand I'm going to hand over to her now. Go ahead, Anjana, please.
Thank you, Josephine. Here's Adrienne Alberts in her beautiful photo. She is our Chief Diversity Officer and also my boss. And let me introduce her. And I totally pushed that we talk a little, somebody else talks about her because she will be humble and not. So we'll give her some opportunity to also speak about her, but let me tell you who she really is. She will also tell the truth about herself. Sorry, just being silly there. So Adrienne, like I said, she is the Chief Diversity Officer for the American Red Cross. She's been in the sector for organizational leadership, right? Diversity, talent management, operations, and career development for more than 20 years. So she's really the perfect person to speak today for this particular topic. And she's done a lot of work around DEI. And she's been here in the Red Cross arena for 8 years. And she's done a lot of different areas in the Red Cross, human resources, our disaster cycle services, so the humanitarian side of it. And now she's leading our DEI work. She's also worked in other places in GDIT, where she led the talent management program for them. She also launched the Center of Excellence for this place where they actually hired people for 2 major corporations in America. And then she's also co-authored a chapter on winning the war for college talent, where she's talking about diversity recruitment. As you know, in many different countries, including the US, there's a big challenge where people are just, there's not enough diverse recruitment. There's a lot of talent there, but how do we bring in, because often people just keep recruiting very similar sort of demographics in the organization. So she's really a champion on that. She's also been on various different boards. As a matter of fact, she is a vice president for the Caroline Center Board of Directors. And then she's also on the Selinger Board for Business at Loyola University in Maryland. And the Caroline Board actually is a nonprofit organization focusing on career preparation for unemployed and underemployed women in Baltimore City. So again, right, how apt speaker for this group today. Really, really excited to hear from you, Adrienne, today. She is a native of Virginia, which is a state really next to Washington, D.C., and has done her Master's in Education in Counseling Psychology with a concentration on college student personal administration, and her BS in Psychology from James Madison University, also here in Virginia. So I'm really excited and grateful, Adrienne, that you agreed to speak to us today. She's new to GlowRed, but she's not new to mentoring women, helping them with their career development, especially diverse women from different cultures. So over to you, Adrienne. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Anjana. I appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for joining today. I was going to say morning. I keep forgetting we are in multiple time zones across the globe. So for some of you, you are yawning and trying to stay awake because it's very late in the evening. But I am delighted to be able to spend some time with you today, and honored that I was asked to come and share a little bit about my experience with mentorship. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And I am going to share just a few tidbits about myself, but I'm going to talk to you about them through a few stories about mentors who have touched my life and my experience. So we don't have to stay on this slide. Actually, Anna, if you'll switch just to the next one, we can stay there for a little bit. But I thought of a couple of different people. And as I was thinking of who might I share, I was thinking about the lessons they actually taught me that might be meaningful for a conversation about mentorship. And I was sharing with the group this morning, I was really fortunate that that I had to pick between so many people. I've really had the fortunate experience to be invested in by some really amazing individuals throughout my career. And I hope this is a conversation that will expand that for all of us. But the first one I was thinking about really was a mentor that I had in my graduate program. Her name was Karen. And Karen really did a tremendous job of helping me figure out what my strengths were, right? How do I articulate what I'm good at doing? You're leaving graduate school and you're getting started in a first role. You can be nervous and really wanting to showcase who you are. And Karen did a tremendous job of helping me articulate my strengths. But she also was masterful at helping me hone my passion and really turn it into a really clear vision for what my dreams would be. Karen was the first of many people who saw far more for me than I saw for myself at the time. I laugh now because she saw this role for me. She saw this career progression for me when I couldn't see it for myself probably nearly 30 years ago. So she was really great at taking and helping me cultivate what was in me and really be thoughtful about how I would share that. Karen was important in teaching me a really valuable lesson. She really taught me that you can never dream big enough, right? So that was a gift that she left in me as she helped me really start to do some pivotal things in my career. The second mentorship experience that I reflected on was about my first job after a career transition. So it was a different phase in my career. I'd been working for over 10 years in a profession, and then I made a switch. And in that organization, I had the honor of meeting Paige. So I was working in an energy company, highly technical. We managed nuclear plants. And so I went from a higher ed setting to working in a very engineering, technical, and science-driven field. And so I had to learn how to translate a lot of things, translate the language that I used, translate the experience that I have. And I was really fortunate to meet Paige because Paige was a trained opera singer turned IT project manager. So you couldn't be far different, right? But Paige really mastered those transformational and transitional skills that you can use across many different disciplines. And I saw her do that in her work in the organization. And I watched her and I learned from her. And I asked her, like, what really is most important? Paige went from an IT project manager to being a chief people officer and has really been influential in small startups and large organizations helping to craft their people strategies. That isn't where she started when she was training to be an opera singer, but she really honed how do you use those skills in very different environments. And the really, really important lesson that Paige taught me, Anjana will giggle because I share it often, is the skills that you have, those transferable skills are critical to your success. Smart people can learn content, but you cannot always learn the pivotal skills that will help you move your career forward in the amount of time you have to make an impression in a new environment. And so I'll always be grateful for that information and that guidance that Paige invested in me to help me learn that lesson, which I have used to this day in my career. So the third mentor that I thought about, I met actually at the Red Cross, at the American Red Cross. And that mentor's name was Sherry. So I met Sherry when I was new to the organization. I was building a program for interns to help budding professionals learn more about our organization and start to cultivate and develop their own professional skills. And we had a session that had leaders come to speak to them to really invest in them about how to hone their skills and navigate the organization. Sherry was tremendous. She had everybody in the room, right, sitting at the edge of their seats and eager to ask questions. And it was masterful how she galvanized the energy of that group of individuals and had them all passionate about the Red Cross movement. And so I kept watching Sherry. I kept my eye on her as I continued to grow in my own career at the American Red Cross. And then I found myself exploring a first executive level role. What would I want that to be? I wanted to be her. So I was like, she's a chief operating officer. If I want to be Sherry one day, how do I do that? So I asked her. I pulled her aside and I asked her if she'd be willing to have a conversation with me, and she did. And so we talked about what it would take to be a chief operating officer. She looked at my resume and she was like, "You've got a great foundation and background for it." And then Sherry took a next step. She invited me to work on a project with her and members of her team so that I could really see what she was doing every day in this work. What kind of topics did she focus on? And it went well. I was able to perform well. And Sherry then took another step in that Sherry really encouraged someone to interview me for a role. And I say encouraged, I'm fairly confident Sherry just told them that they were going to interview me for this role. She didn't tell them they had to hire, but I'm fairly confident she used her political clout to tell them that they would at least have a conversation with me. And that was so important in my career because I did great in the interview as well. And I wound up getting that job that took me out of my comfort zone, put me in a different part of the movement and the mission set that we lean into. And it was the thing that changed the trajectory of my career. And I am convinced is the reason that I sit in this seat as the Chief Diversity Officer for the Red Cross today. Sherry really taught me another valuable lesson. Well, she taught me two. One was that when an opportunity is presented, you lean into it, you take it, and you do your absolute best in it because people are watching you and will ultimately be talking about you in rooms that you're not in. So take advantage of all of those opportunities. The second thing that Sherry taught me, which I now invest in significantly in my work, is when you have an opportunity to pull somebody up, you do it, right? When you are in a position to advance the experience of another professional, you make sure that you take that opportunity and continue to create and build the pipeline for the future. I had 3 very different mentors, all that taught me 3 very different lessons, all of them that have been really important and powerful in my experience and my career growth. My hope is that I pour that into individuals every day. So I want to invest a little bit of it in us and as a group today by digging into what does mentorship mean? So 3 different stories, 3 different ways that individuals had the opportunity to impact us. But what really is mentorship? So let's look at this next slide. Let's define it, right? Let's really dig in. And there are lots of different ways that you might find different definitions that explore what mentorship might be. I'm going to share 2 different definitions, but we're going to focus on mentorship for the most of our call today. So mentorship really, in the most traditional sense, is when an individual chooses to share their knowledge, guidance, and the influence and information they can share and impart with an individual who has less experience. At the most basic, that is what mentorship is, the giving of one's knowledge and support to an individual who has less experience. Karen did that for me, and Paige did that for me. They mentored me. Now there's a more specific kind of mentorship, which is sponsorship. And sponsorship is when an individual uses their social, their career, or their political capital to provide opportunities and advocate specifically for individuals with less experience. Sherry sponsored me in my experience. Now, both are important to the advancement of women, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Why is this so important in our work, and particularly in our discussion and the work we do in DE&I? But for the purposes of this conversation, consider both of those, mentorship and sponsorship, as different pieces of the same body of work, which for the remainder of our conversation and discussion today, we're going to just call it all mentorship. But they're very important in how we can build pipelines of talent for the organizations we serve and the mission that and movement that we are all a part of. So I just want to call out just this one piece. There is information on Harvard Business Review. So we'll share these slides with you in the small notes at the bottom, which I'm sure that you can't see right now. They're so small. But the small notes at the bottom, there's an article that really talks about how do you cultivate the experiences to achieve outcomes in sponsorship. And so I just want to call note to that, knowing that you all will have access to that after the presentation. I highly encourage you to read it as you think about how you might choose to lean into sponsorship in your work. But let's pull and tease out mentorship a little bit more. There are different kinds of mentorship that will be really important at different phases of your career. So let's talk about those. So on the next slide, 3 just traditional kinds of mentorship. There is the traditional mentorship where you have an individual who tends to be more senior in their experience, who will, again, share their guidance and their insight with someone who is more junior. So that's the more traditional experience. We often think about it when we think of mentorship, finding someone who is in a leadership role, who we can learn from, who we can see them model the appropriate behaviors, and that we can start to adapt those for our own experiences. So most of the time when people are talking about mentorship, they're talking about that. What we see in the phases of the lives and the arc of our careers is we lean into traditional mentorship earlier in our careers, or when you're starting something new in your career. So for example, when I was starting from graduate school, that was a traditional mentorship experience. When I had a career change and I was taking on a very different body of work, and so I was really new in it, that was a more traditional mentorship experience. But as we grow in our work and our experience, mentorship also changes with us. And so peer mentorship is another phenomenal way of being invested in and investing in one another. And very easy. It's individuals who are relatively at the same level of experience, potentially the same level of exposure. They may have different spheres or environments within which they've played that out, and they come together to support each other as they continue to grow in their experience. What I see now at this stage of my career is that many of the individuals that I connect with also are at executive levels in their organization. And so they understand the experiences that I'm going through, right? The challenges that you face at this level of my career. And so we're investing in one another. So that peer level of mentorship can be really important as you think about the phase that you are in your career as well. I also think about peer mentorship when you're at the phase of your career that you're thinking about retirement, right? So mentorship and this career arc that we have, it isn't just about starting. It is also about being in the middle of a really gratifying career experience when you are trying to grow and develop and advance and achieve. But it can also be really important as you are thinking about the end of the bulk of your professional career, and you're thinking about what you will do as you transition out of that more traditional day-to-day experience and you move into retirement. And peer mentorship can be a phenomenal experience for individuals at that phase of their experience as well. Because as you think about how you remain involved and engaged, it may be challenging if you've not experienced that, but to have a community of individuals to lean into can be really important. So think about that at the different phases of your career. You may lean into mentorship in a very different way. Now, reverse mentorship is another way of thinking about mentorship. So this is just a different take. It is where somebody who may be junior in their hierarchy in an organization is investing in somebody who has more seniority in an organization, but that junior person may have more experience in a particular area. So the example that we see often when we talk about reverse mentorship really hones in and leans into technology spaces, right? We've seen it in movies, we hear it all the time, that individuals who have more technical experience are reverse mentoring individuals who may have less technical experience. But it can also be discipline specific. So I found myself in my career having a reverse mentorship experience where I was supporting a CEO who was trying to really grow and develop their competence in diversity, equity, and inclusion. It was a new space for that leader in an organization, and they really wanted to lean into the moment and show up well. And I'd had some prior experience. And because we'd worked together, they asked me if I wouldn't mind mentoring them through some of the experiences they were going to be working through in their organization. And so I had an opportunity to really mentor up to this individual with a much more senior level of experience than I had myself. So consider that, the power that you have throughout the arc of your career to really take advantage of individuals in different phases that might be able to invest in you. So different kinds of mentorship. Let's talk about why this is important. And then we'll dive in just a little bit to how you might manage it. But why is mentorship even important? Why do we talk about that in GlowRED? Why is it a topic that we even lean into? Well, the data can really be stark when you think about how leadership is really distributed across the globe. So when you think about the fact that 1 in 4 executive level senior executive leaders is a woman, so 1 in 4, and 1 in 20 senior level executive leaders are women of color. So again, 1 in 4 generally, so a fourth of our leaders are women, and then 1 in 20 are actually women of color. But then take a step back and think that 45% of women aspire to be a CEO or the senior executive leader in an organization. As we think about it, how many of you are sitting in this room today because you aspire to be an executive leader in this movement? So 45% of us want to aspire to those levels, and only 23% of us are likely to achieve it, given the structures that are in place today to promote leaders in organizations. I was looking at some information in an organization called Lean In, partners with McKinsey and Company to do a study that looks at the state of women in the workplace. And McKinsey and Company, just in this past year, did some work to look at what does the pipeline of talent look like for leadership roles? And really that first pivotal step in a leader's experience is when you move from being solely responsible for your own work and experience to being responsible for the work of others. So moving in that people leadership step, that first manager role. When we looked at the landscape, for every 100 men who make that promotion from an individual contributor to the leader of people, 87% of women also achieve that step. And again, when we look at the intersectionalities, only 73% of women of color actually achieve that same level of advancement. So when we start to look at the pool of talent that is available for leadership roles, to be role models, to really set the course where we can advance and pull others with us, that pipeline and that funnel of talent, particularly talent that advances women, starts to get smaller and smaller as you think at the levels of intersectionality that show up in the identities that we have and the experiences that we bring to work. Now, the goal of our organizations is indeed, right, to ensure that we have the best talent and the best individuals to help ensure that our organizations are inclusive and that we can meet the moment of our missions. And I'm thinking particularly about the movement that we are all in and that we all share. And so in that environment, let me pause for a second. Thank you. In that environment, it is important that we invest in the tools that will help us change those statistics and those dynamics. What we've seen time and time again is that mentorship, being in an environment where individuals have the opportunity to be invested in and learn from the experience of others, that it creates outcomes that start to increase the odds that women will be that 87% or that 73%. It increases the odds that the individual will be that 1 in 4 or that 1 in 20. And it is by increasing the confidence of individuals to be able to move forward with their aspirations or dreams. It will help them cultivate skills that will help them move forward in the working environment. And it gives them access and exposure to areas or opportunities that they may not see without that additional investment. And so mentorship serves in a role that helps to create all of those things. So I hope that as you sit here and you're joining this conversation, you are empowered by the notion that leaning into mentorship, being intentional about these experiences, can actually help change the trajectory of the outcomes of your career aspirations as well. All right. So that's why we're taking the time today to lean into mentorship. So now I want us to get into some of the nitty-gritty. What does that mean? How do we do it, right? How do we advance this in a way that'll make us successful? And then I want to play the words of somebody who I've been inspired by in a career who's going to talk to us a little bit about mentorship as well. So let's start by focusing in on how do you lean into mentorship? Like if you don't have a mentor, how might you start that process? People ask me all the time. I was recently in a room of individuals whose career profession is in human resources. They are managing strategies around people and advancement and development all day. And we had the fortune to talk about this conversation about mentorship. And I was surprised by how many people actually didn't have mentors in their experience. Look at data, probably 1 in 4 employees actually has a formal mentor in their experience. So when I say formal mentor, I mean literally a traditional experience where you've asked someone to invest in your growth and development and experience, and or that you are giving that back to them more formally. I'm not going to ask people to identify, but many of us, even on the call today, just given the numbers of people who participated, probably also don't have formal mentors currently in our careers. So my goal is that we're going to change that today. So the questions that people in this room were asking were literally nitpicky. How do you ask? How often can you reach out? When is it pushy? And when is it okay to ask for a next level of support? So I just want to share a few things that might help with that before we watch a little video. So the first I would offer, and these are the pieces that as we work and get into our breakout groups, we want to contextualize based on the region that we're in, based on the level that you are in your organization, culturally, the approach that will work in, say, the US may not work in Egypt. Right? As I think about just the cultural dynamics of those environments, the way I might approach a mentor to ask for support, including who I might ask. Because in my environment, I can ask a male to mentor me and have that be seen as wholly appropriate. In other environments, that may not be appropriate or welcome based on the customs or the culture. And so as we talk about these tips, just keep in mind, these are the areas where contextualizing it in your environment will be really important. And those may be some things that we dig into additionally in the Q&A. But first, the whole beginning, it's simply to begin. So asking one person to connect with you. Now, that ask can happen in many ways. It can be an email that you send to them. It can be pulling them aside after a conversation or a setting or environment where you've seen them. Many individuals here are part of the Glow Red movement. Many of you are likely to be engaging in the global conferences where we'll be coming together to talk about the important work of the movement. Exceptional environments to be able to practice this notion of simply asking if someone would be willing to share. And I encourage people to start small. 30 minutes of your time. So, right, not a lifetime of investment initially, but literally maybe 30 minutes of time just so that you can learn more about their experiences. You'd be surprised how much people want to talk about themselves. Even when we say that it is not advisable to do so, right? To be braggadocious and self-focused is not a characteristic that we laud and encourage, particularly in women. But individuals want to give, and if their experience can be helpful, you'd be surprised how many people are willing to take a small amount of their time to just talk a little bit about their experience. That talking about their experience was really the thing that started me with my first 2 mentors, was just asking them for a little bit of time to learn more about what they were doing. Their examples were really powerful in helping to teach me different ways of being in my own career. So start small by just making that discreet ask. Can I have 30 minutes of your time? I'd love to learn a little bit more about your career as I continue to explore different phases of my own. Then follow up with them. So if you've emailed someone, knowing that we are busy and we have lots of email, I'd encourage you to follow up again. Give it maybe about 2 weeks, and then follow up again if you've not heard. And if you've met someone in person, follow up more quickly. So if you've met someone in person, I would encourage you within 48 hours to follow up with them via email to request a time to meet and or If they have an assistant, work with their assistant to get on their calendar. However they've instructed you to engage, follow those rules within 48 hours, because it shows that you really are serious about wanting to get to know individuals. I've often heard from folks that they don't want to be a bother, right? People are busy. Executives have a lot on their plate, so they don't want to take up too much time. I can't tell you the number of people who've asked me actually lean into mentorship. I'm sure it's been hundreds. But the fraction that actually do it is so much smaller. And the investment of that time is a gift to me. So one of the things I also want you to think about, so start by either sending an email, connecting on a tool like LinkedIn that might give you the opportunity to connect with someone, or in person, if you have the opportunity to, going up and introducing yourself and asking just for a fraction of time. And you could do that small period of time in each of those. I would say in every single one of those environments, make sure that as you leave it, ask for your next connection. I'd love to continue this conversation. Would you be willing to continue this discussion with me? Or if you're not sure that that would be the right environment, asking, who else do you think I should talk to if I'm interested in X, right? Learning more about a field, learning more about a skill, learning more about a role level of engagement, learning more about a particular part of the mission in the movement. Any of those things, if you're interested in learning more, ask for that thing. And then over time, as you continue to follow up and extend those conversations, you'd be surprised at how long those relationships turn into. For me, they've turned into 30 years. They've turned into 20 years. And in one of them, it was just a year, right? So some of them have been career long, and some of them have been much shorter periods of time, although invested in helping me continue to move forward. So be thoughtful of that. How can you make that initial ask? The next thing is, am I going to be a pest, right? If I keep reaching out to someone, what are the appropriate indicators of whether or not I can continue to reach out to an individual? That's a great question that people often ask. And the guidance that I would share there is really focus on the signals that you get from that individual. If someone is encouraging and engaging in a conversation with you, you can always ask for an extension, and or frankly ask if they'd be willing to mentor and invest using their experience to help support your growth and development. If you've reached out to someone, so say this isn't someone that you know well, and you've reached out to them at least 2 times, right? To either via a LinkedIn or an email, and they have been unresponsive, then I would move to a new individual to engage with, unless you know someone who has a connection to that individual who may be willing to help make an introduction for you, right? Because if individuals they don't have the bandwidth or the time, then they may not be responsive, and that's absolutely okay. That isn't a rejection or an indicator of who we are. It is absolutely an indicator of their capacity, and shouldn't discourage us from wanting to do it again. So that's the third most common thing that I hear from individuals is, how do you deal with the rejection if someone doesn't want to mentor you? And I've never seen it happen. I've never seen someone be rejected from a request for development. Now, what I have seen, and I have done even myself, is I don't know that I was the best person to actually help them achieve the goal that they were seeking. And so instead of me pouring time and energy and actually not helping them advance, what I did was help them find someone who might be a better fit for what they were trying to experience. More often than not, I've seen that happen, and that leaders will lean in and pour into you. Even if they're not going to be the best fit, they will often try to help you find the right fit, particularly if you've shown the initiative and the interest to want to learn more and develop. All right. So a couple of things. You make your introduction, you extend those conversations, you ask for who else you should be connecting with. And then you make sure that you are keeping your mentor informed, right? Keep them engaged in what's happening with your experience. The advice that they shared, did it work? Did you find challenges with it? Are there other ways that you might be able to glean and learn from them? One of the biggest things that happens for someone who is mentoring, and I hope that many of you on this call have done that, you have had the opportunity to mentor others, is it is the joy of seeing someone excel, right? So the fuel for the mentor is actually hearing how it's going, right? Understanding that their investment actually is paying off for you in the way that you wanted it to, or to be able to help you triage if that is indeed not happening. So if the advice didn't work and you saw another challenge, giving them the opportunity to help you navigate and negotiate that is actually rewarding for the mentor. So those are just some early tips to how might you start the conversation, how might you extend it, and how might you invest back in your mentor to hopefully make sure that those relationships are strong and solid over time. So let's hear from another individual, somebody who I have been following her career. She is not my mentor. I wish I had her in my list, but it makes me think, I might make that ask. Is Sheryl Sandberg. So we're gonna look at a video on this next slide. I'm gonna tee it up. Sheryl Sandberg is the former chief operating officer for Facebook/Meta. And she was the founder of an organization called Lean In. She also wrote a book of the same name. Sheryl Sandberg thought it was really important to help create environments that were designed to help women actually advance their career goals and create a just world, right? She really wanted to cultivate women with that experience. And she also recognized that mentorship mattered. So let's take a moment to hear from Sheryl and her experience.
Women accomplish amazing things when we support each other, and we can all do this by mentoring and sponsoring other women. Mentorship and sponsorship are key drivers of success. These personal connections lead to opportunities and promotions that are crucial for career development. I'm grateful for the mentors who've advised me, made introductions, and taught me by example throughout my career. And research tells us these relationships make a difference. Women with sponsors are more likely to ask for stretch assignments and pay raises than women without sponsors. Unfortunately, women often miss out. At times, men gravitate towards sponsoring other men, with whom they sometimes connect more naturally. Women and men may also avoid mentoring relationships out of concern that time spent together will look inappropriate. More than 2/3 of men say the senior leaders who have helped them were mostly other men. The good news is that we can work together to start changing the numbers today. Of course, it's important for senior level women to invest in women who are just starting out. Building these relationships is a great way for women who've already been successful to pay it forward and get more women on the path to leadership roles. The problem is, there aren't always enough senior level women to go around. But there are no rules on who can be a mentor, and it's never too early to start. If you're even a few years into your career, find a woman who's coming up behind you, a college student who's interested in your field, someone who just entered the workforce. Your input is valuable. You may have just been through what she's experiencing and can help her take the next step. Peers can also mentor and sponsor each other. This can be every bit as effective as traditional mentorship. Your peers are in the trenches with you and can offer a perspective your superiors can't. My peers have certainly done this for me throughout my career. For example, earlier in my career, lots of my older mentors advised me against taking a job at Google and then again against Facebook. But almost all of my peers, my friends, understood the potential of these companies and of Silicon Valley. Their counsel was a valuable resource for me then, and it continues to be now. No matter where you are in your career, I hope you'll find a woman to mentor. It will take all of us to get to a more equal world, and we'll get there faster by working together.
So So I love the message that Sheryl Sandberg shared and the example of how mentorship really impacted her career in a number of different ways. So let's take that and think about the top 3 tips to really make sure mentorship succeeds for you. And then we'll close out with a challenge that I have for you before we move towards our break. So on this next slide, there we go. On this next slide, there are just a few recommendations for successful mentorship. So I've often been asked, what are the things that keep mentorship relationships from being successful? I am sure, again, given the number of individuals who are on the call today, that many of us have tried to have strong mentoring relationships, and they have not always worked out the way we've wanted to. And how do we keep that from being the experience we have from this day forward as we continue to think about connecting with individuals and moving forward? These are the 3 tips that I think will be most important in helping you have really successful mentoring relationships. The first of those is to be really clear with yourself about what you need. So we often think that success in mentorship is really making sure you find the right person. We'll get there. But the first step is really being clear with ourselves about what we need. How many of you, and again, I won't ask you to raise your hands, but this might be something that you process over the break. How many of you are really clear on exactly what you want a mentor to offer for you? Are you trying to learn a new skill? Are you trying to understand the working dynamics in an organization? Are you simply trying to get exposure because you're not sure what you need to get from where you are to the goal or dream that you have about where you're going, right? But it's important for you to be really clear on what you need, because that is the only way you'll be able to share that effectively with someone whom you're enlisting to support your goal or outcome. So it's important for you to take some time as you start this process of really thinking about mentorship to be clear on what it is you need. Ask yourself questions, document that, journal. All of those things will help you to get to some greater clarity on what you need. I'll offer also that certain mentors are really great at helping you hone and clarify those pieces. They are really great at helping you hone in on what you need. Again, Karen, the first mentor I spoke about, played that really important role for me in my career. She helped me create that clarity. But if that is what you need, that is also important to know, because it helps you ask for exactly what it is you need. And that will enable individuals to be able to understand if they can provide that, who else they might know who can provide that, and to ensure that they're actually giving you what you need. So that's number 1. The number 1 tip is be clear with yourself about what you need. The second recommendation is to be really intentional about selecting a mentor. And the reality is the mentee is selecting the mentor. Now, it happens in odd ways and other times where individuals will see something in you and they choose to invest in you. But in this environment, we want to make sure that you have the ownership and opportunity to drive your career. And so you want to be intentional about who you select as a mentor. The dynamic of a mentoring relationship, as I mentioned, can take on a timeline that could span a bulk of your career, but it could be as short as a few months, as a few years. So it's important in understanding what you need to be thoughtful about who are the individuals that might be able to provide and support that work for you. So again, if it's skill cultivation or development, you might think of an individual who you know has that skill and has proven using it successfully to reach out to. If it's someone who you emulate and are interested in emulating the career trajectory they've had, you might identify someone who's got that experience to lean into. But keep two things in mind when you are being intentional about selecting that mentor. That one, every mentor may not be a lifelong friend. And so calibrating your expectation for the role they serve in your life will be important. That the individual that I'm leaning into may really have information they can impart for me, but may not be the person that I keep in my network, right? And invite from my network into my friend circle. But they are someone that I respect and that I can work with effectively to learn the skill or accomplish the goal. There are other individuals where the fit that you have, the connection that you have is genuine, that it is lasting, and that the give and take in that relationship grows to a place where it can span a significant period of time in your professional world or your life. And that is also appropriate. But it's important for us to calibrate our expectations and know that some mentors are going to be able to serve a very concrete and specific outcome for us, and others are going to be able to invest in us over a longer period of time. And if we understand those expectations going in, right, it allows us to really leverage and benefit from individuals who may not be the individuals that we choose to share that, right, a conversation over that morning beverage of choice that we talked about in our opening icebreaker. So just keep that in mind. Managing our own expectations is really important as we think of how we'll interact with mentors, and being really intentional about who we select. The third tip is really you being active and in control of your mentoring relationships. So again, this is an environment where I understand words have power. So active and in control in a dynamic of professional relationships and power dynamics and organization can really be things that as women, we have to be really thoughtful about. What does that look like in our engagement? And again, culturally, how does that show up in our environment? In the energy company, and I'm sharing these examples within the context of my US-based experience. In the energy company that I worked in, that was very science-driven, very engineering-driven, being very direct was important, regardless of your gender experience, in being able to have people understand what your needs and expectations were and to be able to meet them. As I think about my experience in the Red Cross movement, where at the American Red Cross, our values include compassion, right? And as we think about our fundamental principles, they really call on us to lean into vulnerability and relationships in a different way. And so the way that I approach controlling my relationships at the American Red Cross, very different than the way I did it at the energy company, just given the culture of those organizations. So keep that in mind. Those will be really important dynamics that we think through. But when I say active and in control, what I mean by that is you are the individual who, if you want mentorship relations to really yield for you, you are likely going to be the initiator and the prompter and the glue that holds that relationship together. So you'll make the ask. You should always be the person making sure that you get time with the other individual, whether it is a social meal or a formal meeting, that you are the person who is making sure that that time is secured, that you are the individual who is following up to make sure that they understand how things have gone, and that you are the one that initiates the next contact. What I often see happen is that individuals start to think of mentorships like friendships. And in friendships, it's a give and take. A friendship doesn't feel empowering if you are always the one who has to initiate an engagement or an interaction. But as we think of mentorship, it's important that we recognize that we really are in the driver's seat as the person being mentored, peer, traditional, or otherwise. And so keep in mind that you are the person who will be initiating those interactions. If you keep those 3 tips in mind as you think about engaging in your mentorship relationships, you are likely to be able to form relationships that will serve you for the time that you need them or over the course of your career. So I hope that those tips were helpful. What I hope this is done, so I've talked at you a lot. What I hope that it's done is start to spark some ideas about what mentorship can mean in your career, how you might initiate those conversations, and how you might continue to lean into those relationships to make sure that they are successful for you over time. What I want to do is also challenge you, right? A great way to understand what it feels like to be mentored is to mentor. So Sheryl Sandberg said it in her message, and I'd like to share that same challenge with you. That if you haven't already done so in your world, make sure that you are creating the space in your career to give back what individuals and invest forward what individuals will be investing in you as you move forward with establishing these mentor relationships by making sure that you are mentoring someone else, someone who is just starting out in the movement, somebody who is looking at a new stage of their engagement in the movement, someone who can benefit from your knowledge and your experience in this tremendous movement that we all have the fortune to be a part of. So I challenge you to be thoughtful about the role you might be able to play as a mentor, as well as the experience that you'll cultivate as a mentee. Thank you for the time, energy, and investment in each other and in us advancing this work together in this movement. I am honored to have spent this time with you today, and I look forward to your continued success and our continued success together as we move forward. Thank you for letting me join you.
Thank you, Adrienne. Very well done. And thank you all for all your contributions and insights. Let's stay together and let's continue to build each other up. On that note, Happy New Year. See you soon.